Hello everybody, I'm Isaiah Cartwright. I'm the lead game designer for Guild Wars 2, and we're going to talk a little bit about Ranger today. Really, this is kind of nuts and bolts beginning stuff on how a Ranger works, how their stats and skills and some trait advice. I think the first thing I kind of want to go into on Ranger is the kind of first pattern that everyone likes to do when they first start playing Ranger. A lot of people kind of gravitate towards longbow, and they like to run a pet like a bear or something tinky. And while this is good and can do different things, it's not really very optimal for the way the Ranger operates. And so, once you kind of understand a little bit how things are going, I think you kind of want to move on to some more advanced strategies. One of the big benefits that a Ranger brings to the table is their ability to have kind of a different play style with their pet and with the way they're functioning. And this does mean that you can have kind of a more defensive or supporty pet while you're doing damage if you want. But you can really kind of muddy up your overall effectiveness if you kind of go into that right away. Usually what I like to do when I'm running pets is either run one more DPS-oriented pet and one more utility-oriented pet. This is really good for allowing me to kind of switch around. And switching pets is extremely important for a Ranger. He gets a lot of benefits and things that happen when he swaps pets. Swapping pets will resurrect your pet. And so really getting into the habit of swapping between pets while you're playing in combat is really important to maximizing the effectiveness of a Ranger. And also, all pets have a unique skill associated with their pet. And this is really important to maximizing your DPS, maximizing different aspects of your character. And so really focus on how to do, what skills you're using, when you're using them, and swapping them around a lot. So let's talk a little bit about stats. With the Ranger, I like to run a lot more kind of a precision and base builds. They have a lot of really high base precision because a lot of their traits that you can go into can boost up your precision, and they have some really good lines with precision. Anytime you see precision and crit damage linked together in a line, it usually works really well for the way your profession kind of works together. And so for this, I like to run a lot of kind of baseline Berserker's gear. A lot of PvE builds like to run Knight's gear for other professions. I find I don't want to do that as much on my Ranger. I really want to maximize every bit of DPS that I can, and the higher armor I get, the more you will get aggro from other creatures. And so I think it's really important to try to kind of be a little more purity of purpose with whatever you're trying to do with your Ranger. And so that's why I like going really heavily into Berserker's gear. This kind of comes along with what runes you're going to run with your character. If I am going to go Berserker's gear and I'm trying to go for a heavy just raw damage output, there's kind of a couple ways to build damage. You can go conditions or you can go raw damage. But if I am going to go raw damage, then Berserker's where I want to be. And what I like to run is Scholar runes. I kind of like Scholar runes a lot for PvE because they really force me to play a little bit better. Their big damage bonus comes when you're above 90% health, and so you start to get into the mindset of how you prevent damage all the time. This can be really helpful. You have a lot of prevent damage with just your dodge ability all the time, but the Ranger also has a lot of abilities that innately come with some defense. While you're using them, you'll get an evade here or there. And so really kind of learning to watch your targets, watch the creatures around you, and make sure you don't get hit to make sure you're always getting that damage bonus. I just kind of like what it does mentally when I'm playing. But if you want to go into, you don't like that aspect, there's kind of the Ogre set. Ogre set always is a really high DPS rune set and can be really good for just keeping your damage up. And there's kind of an extra rock dog that can get summoned while you're fighting. It helps here and there, but really it's just the overall stats that you get are really good on this set. And another one that I kind of like a little bit, I don't like all stat as much on Ranger. I find he doesn't get as much benefit from it. But if I do want to run an all-stat rune set, I'll run Travelers because I like the extra condition duration and boon duration a lot. Sometimes I will just go 5 into this set and take a 6th of Divinity so I can keep a little bit more crit damage. If you're poor, these are all quite expensive runes. People like these styles of play. You can just kind of go with real simple ruby orbs. They're usually a lot cheaper, and they get you a lot of the way. A full set of them is 12% crit damage, where you're usually running like about 170 power off these things, 175, 140, something around there, and then you get like 8% crit damage out of some of these pieces. But so this one gets you a little more crit damage, but a lot less power and a lot less precision. So they're not the best. You want to run these other stuff when you get there, but if you're poor, it's a really good route to go. Then accessories, I usually always run Berserker accessories when I'm running that kind of build. I just kind of go all in raw damage and really use my skills and my dodge to keep me alive. For weapons for that type of build, I like Sword Warhorn the most. Sword can be a little tricky to use. It has its skills have a little bit of movement into them, and that can be a little bit disorienting to get used to at first. But they have a lot of effect to them. You know, they give you that evade. They also give you a lot of damage. Your next two skills on Sword, they really allow you to kind of retreat from the battle and jump into the battle. They're kind of awkward movement skills to get used to, but once you get used to them, they're really effective for retreating, getting back into the fight, closing the distance, doing those things. So I really like to go that route. Warhorn, I like getting group buffs, and blast combos are really good, especially I feel like Healing Spring's one of my favorite heals in the game. It's super strong. Not only does it give AoE healing with the regeneration, you can trade it up to give you vigor, which really reinforces some of that constantly dodging. And the water fields, one of the better fields that you want to interact with in the game. You can get a lot of healing out of it, and you know, following up immediately from your water field into a blast combo gets you some good healing. And it can kind of get a little bit of support even when you're running high damage builds with that kind of stuff. So that's a lot of what I'm running. When I'm running raw DPS builds, there's a couple options. You really kind of decide how much damage you're going to do with your pet versus how much damage you can do with your character. And really your overall damage comes from the combination of those two. Really having to manage your pet and keep it alive is really important for you doing a lot of damage. It's why I've always liked the Jungle Stalker, or not Jungle Stalker, sorry, Jaguar. He has really good raw stats when you're going out with him, and his innate ability puts him into stealth. And while he's in stealth, stuff stops aggroing on him. He can get a lot of damage that way. You get a lot of raw stuff going right from there. One of the key traits I feel like when running good damage on your pets is in the nature magic line. It makes it so that all the boons that you get on your character immediately are shared with your pet. And a key thing about it is it's not shared. When you get might, you will give 10 seconds of might to someone else. So there's kind of places where you'll get really small increments of might, and your pet can get more of that. And so that's why all the things are listed here in this trait. But it can be really important for when people are doing AoE boons and you're working with a group and you're trying to do speedruns in a dungeon, any of those types of things. This really will increase the overall survivability of your pet because some of those defensive boons that people are throwing around just get transferred right over there. This also is really important for you when you are running different types of abilities. When you have like Rampagers as one, these things kind of really double up to keeping your pet really having a lot of boons on him. And so I really like kind of that synergy when I'm running the pet. When you're kind of determining where all your damage is coming from for your character, there's a couple routes you can go. You can get high Beast Mastery lines. They changed how much their effectiveness in, but one of the big things if you're going to go this route is whenever you swapping around your pets, you and your pet will gain some quickness. Kind of an on-demand, lower cooldown quickness like this is really interesting. You can kind of combo it up with your own Quickening Zephyr quickness to get a lot of burst damage in different ways. But that's kind of depending on how you're wanting to build your character. I usually go a little less this, and I kind of like to go into the Marksmanship and Skirmishing line. Marksmanship kind of has a couple different really important routes that you could go depending on what types of weapons. If you're trying to do DPS with sword, like I kind of going on here, or melee types of weapons, then you really want to rely on, I like to run a lot of spotter, helps people around me. If you're going to go bow for your damage, get short bow or even long bow in ways, then I think you want to always run piercing arrows. It's really important to kind of turn those weapons more into AoE style weapons and line up your targets, and so that's really important. First line, there's lots of different kind of combinations, but I usually like to, when I'm going raw damage, try to stack as many damage multipliers up. The Ranger gets a couple additional damage multipliers. This one does fight a little bit with your desire to evade around, but depending on what you're trying to do, you can get a lot of damage out of that ability. I do always like if I am going to go into nature magic, because I really like getting fortified bond, I like to get up to bountiful hunter. You just kind of having boons on you, especially when you're running these style builds or with other people, is really normal and easy, and so it becomes just a really guaranteed 5% that you can always run. With the high, going into skirmishing, and you're getting just some natural crit damage and the Berserker's gear, you can get your crit damage to some really good numbers, and it's really important with all the precision that I often run with this character, which kind of comes to your rune set. The high precision can really turn into some damage in some different ways. I always kind of like to run either fire, rune of fire, to get some more AoE out of my character. And I kind of favor sigils of precision more than bloodlust on this character, just because I like the stacking precision to get a little bit more guaranteed out of all my abilities, especially when you're going trying to get different effects out of. There's abilities where every time you crit, you will give your pet might, and that becomes really important to kind of keeping his damage up. The skirmishing line, swapping weapons, giving you fury, super huge. And these things, they're kind of all about swapping back and forth between. I've even seen some ranger builds where they run the same weapon twice, just to maximize kind of constantly swapping all the time. I don't like that. I kind of like having different versions. I often run short bow and PvE with this build, just because it gives me a little bit more options where if I need to interrupt something or get an extra escape skill to get out of there. And I'm already up in their face, so longbow isn't as effective. I think some of the things that can really hinder your overall damage output on longbow is you need to be at max range all the time, which means unless you're really running with a group that's building around doing range combat, you can miss out on a lot of buffs and things like that. But longbow has some fun tricks to it, especially with the stealth that you can get out of it, and the rapid fire being kind of where your big damage is coming from. And if you're going to go that, it's really important that you get piercing arrows in that line. Other kind of sigils that can go, I have I think Sigil of Luck has some interesting play in PvE, especially with your pet gaining its benefits, and so there's some fun there. And then if you are going to continue going runs, you could try run Bloodlust. I just prefer precision here. There is one thing about precision is it does have a little bit of diminishing returns. The more precision you get every point is not as worth as much, and so it's kind of important that you balance your numbers around and do some math if you need to figure out whether you need more power or more precision. Sigils of Battles can also be really good depending on how much you're swapping around. Once again, your pet can get those mites, and so if you're swapping a lot and trying to maximize that benefits, then you can get a lot of boons out of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of in the nuts and bolts, some of the main pieces for damage. I mean, I have Frostbeard on here. If you're going to go into this nature line and do some of these things, you can pick up, I always forget which one it is, you can pick up the increased Frost Spirit triggering effects. There we go. This will double the chances that your procs on those things and make your spirits more durable. This is really important for the spirit build, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But that can really get you just an overall about a little around 7% damage boost to your overall damage when you're running that kind of stuff. And that kind of compounds with all these other damage boosts that you're getting through here, and so that can be really important. Sickums, I've seen a lot of people like Sickum. I just want to talk about it here. It's really interesting. Kind of burst on your pet. I haven't really liked it that much when playing around with it, but I think it's really important to say if you're going to maximize your pet damage, it can be one of those ways that you go. If you don't go this, there's a handful of other different routes you go. I know right in the beginning when you first start, really Sharpening Stone is really appealing. It's a very simple skill and it does those things, but I tend to move away from it rather quickly, and I kind of either want to get some defense out of my skills over here, or work around kind of maximizing my damage output. So the other big build that's very common is if you're going to go conditions. And so if you're really going to run kind of a condition damage build, I think traps is kind of one of the better ways to go. And traps build really comes down to a couple different places. I usually like to run Entangle a little bit more with traps than I do with other stuff. In PvE, Entangle is not as useful as it is in like World v World and those other places, but like if I'm going to go high condition damage, it feels like another really good way to kind of maximize how much conditions I'm cranking out. And so when you're running the condition builds, you can go right into Rabid Set. It is kind of gets your toughness up there again. I do like this if I'm going to run something like the Rune of Undead, where I'm converting that toughness into stuff, and it gets you a little bit more condition damage out of your tuning crystals. And so the Rabid, I think, is one of the better sets to run if you're going to go for this heavier condition damage. But realize, you know, that extra toughness does come with some extra people targeting you. If you don't want to go into that route, you can kind of stack some condition duration routes. Sometimes I'll go just 4 sets into Nightmare and 2 sets into Lissa to get me about a 20% increased condition duration. That combined with running some Veggie Pizza, and you know, I usually even splash into Marksmanship mainly for that piercing attacks. And so you can get up to maximizing your condition duration. That combined with the Trapper's expertise and potency can really increase your overall condition durations that your traps and make those really long. You really want to go all the way into skirmishing if you're going to do that to maximize how often you're throwing your traps down. Trapper's expertise in here will allow you to ground target your traps, can allow you to do a little bit of triggers, but the big thing I like out of it is the larger AoE when I'm in PvE. It can help me get a little more hits on the targets and things like that. And so that allows me to aim around there. And so that can be some big way to run condition damage. I usually run Shortbow when I'm doing condition damage. It's kind of the best at cranking out lots of conditions, and its fast rate of fire can be really good for triggering procs like Sigil of Earth or different crit builds and things like that. The condition damage build can also be really fun when you do go spirits, if you want to be a little bit more tanky. Even when I'm running condition damage build, don't necessarily have to run a condition damage pet. Your stats are very split between your pet and your ranger, and so you can totally still have your pet being just raw damage or your utility being in different routes. I actually find when I am running condition damage, I don't want condition damage pets because it sort of stacks up on if someone removes the conditions, then I lose some of my damage. And so it's kind of good to split some of that between them. And so I do like to stay around more of the DPS pets, kind of birds and cats and things like that when I'm trying to crank out damage. If I am going to go for some defense, sometimes I do go with like some spiders. The spiders can throw out some immobilizes if you want to hold people down or get away. But I find their overall damage output's a lot lower. You can also get just some more stun abilities with knockdowns and things on pounces and stuff like that. But I think the condition damage ranger has a lot of play to it in that you can really spread a lot of conditions quickly, and these can really rack up. Things to always remember when you're doing condition damage builds is if you're running with lots of other people doing condition damage builds in PvE, they don't stack as well, and so on speed runs and things like that, they're not as effective because they're really aiming at more damage over time. But they can be a lot of fun to play, and it's fun to see lots of numbers coming up off of your targets. But if you don't want to run Rabids, you also can run Rampagers, which is usually a really good set for the Ranger. It kind of already has base higher precision, you get a little bit of power and condition damage, and that can really help. Food buffs for either one of these damage builds is pretty straightforward. You know, if you're going to go damage, you go right into kind of your butternut squashes where you're either getting precision and crit damage or power and crit damage. Like I said, it's really kind of a balance of your how much precision and what's that diminishing return. And then sharpening stones for just your raw damage. And so those are kind of big. If you're going to go condition damage, you know, veggie pizzas, really right where you want to be, getting that 40% condition duration, some condition damage, and your tuning crystals, which really increase the overall amount of condition damage you have. And so those are kind of the DPS sides of the Ranger. There's some other bits where you could run Torch if you want to get some more AoE burning out there instead of Warhorn when you're running the condition damage. I like having swiftness a lot, and between your swapping on swiftness and Warhorn and getting those allows you to keep Fury up, which means you don't have to put as much points into precision, and you can start getting more points into power if you're running power builds, and get more points into conditioned damage if you're running conditioned damage builds. And so some other routes that the Ranger can go is kind of their defensive and tanky options, which really comes down to running the Spirit build, which is kind of one of the builds that I think gives you a lot of just innate defense in having everything around you, and it gives you a really nice party res, which can be very powerful. When you're running this kind of build, there's sometimes I'll run Troll Engine if I want to be a little bit more selfish, but I really like Healing Spring, and so kind of bounces between those. The Spirit build really relies on you taking the Spirits Follow You Around trait, and it relies on you taking the Spirits trigger their effect more often, and that they have higher health. Your spirits also have abilities once you summon them out that are really important to keep on your rotation and make sure that you're spelling them out, because you can get a lot of extra benefit from them in many different ways. So really make sure that you're rotating those out. If you do want to go more defensive with the spirits, either whether you're trying to go support, be a little bit more tanky, I do kind of roll over into the Knight set in this route. You can, like I said, also do the Rabbit set to get the toughness. Either way, it's kind of, once again, depending on how you want to get your damage going out there, even though you are more tanky and you have a lot less overall damage output. One of the benefits of going the Spirit build is it can allow you to help everyone around you a lot more, and so you can have a very nice multiplicative effect with the people around you. This can kind of come into play too with Spotter. Spotter becomes really good at spreading that precision around and increasing the overall output of other people. And so those are kind of the basics of some of the kind of starting builds. I know there's a lot more builds out there and a lot other ways to run Ranger, but these are the things that I think can help you get going and get started and really have a lot of effect in playing the character. And so I'm going to answer a couple questions that people have asked for the Ranger. I think one big one that comes up a lot is, what is the Ranger's niche? How do they what makes them stand out from a lot of other professions? And I think there's a couple ways you could answer this. I know some people like to say kind of jack of all trades, but I don't really feel this as much as the Ranger is our primary pet class. Being a primary pet class has a couple advantages to it. It allows you to split focus. It allows you to kind of split your spec in different ways, and I think that becomes really their niche. The fact that you can be damaging kind of two targets at the same time, the fact that you can bring a pet that is a little more tanky when you're a little more DPS-y if you want, the fact that you can go have your pet be higher raw damage and you be raw condition damage, those things allow you to kind of change the flow of the battle by really making there be two targets that you have to go after. And a lot of that relies on per pet survivability, and a lot of that comes through intelligent management of where your pets are at. You have to kind of call your pet back when he's standing in AoEs in times. You have to make sure you're swapping pets to bring them back when they die. Using pets that have some innate defense like Stalk or different things like that can really be important. And so I really think the niche that Ranger brings to the table is that split focus, that ability to kind of have two things at once, which really what brings in the Ranger to kind of the unique ways that he approaches it. And then I think once it gets there, a lot of characters can take on different roles, whether, I talk through some defensive builds and some different types of damage builds, and there's a lot of support that just comes out of like even dropping a water field in the game and comboing off that in a lot of ways. And so those are kind of some different routes that you can go with the Ranger. And so I don't think it's any fair to say that he's any better or worse at being different types of roles. And he definitely doesn't change roles in combat as much as, say, someone like an engineer or an elementalist. You can get a little bit with sweep swapping your pet around, but I find I get a lot of pet swapping just to keep his health up and just to resurrect. And so let's look at another couple questions that people have. I think another one that comes up is, what is people's favorite pets at ArenaNet when playing Ranger? I think this varies just a lot depending on the play styles, how casual or how hardcore the players are. here at Arena. We have a lot of people here with a lot of different play styles. Some people like to take pets based on a theme of a type of character that they make, and other people are big min-maxers and looking for the damage outputs, which is usually kind of where I'm at in those things. So I think it's hard to say that there's no clear favorite and route that people like to go. There's a lot of different styles of play and a lot of ways that you can kind of put that stuff together. If you're asking me, I really like either kind of running the cats for the higher damage. Jaguar is probably my favorite. And then if I want to do something kind of funky, I like going the spiders for the high immobilization, which can do some fun things. And so those are some different routes. Can pets evade is a question that comes up a lot. It's an interesting thought. I think the way things are set up right now, it's not an easy thing for us to change, but it has been something that we've talked about, allowing your pet to get some more defense when you evade. And there might be some interesting traits and things that we work on or something like that can really try to synergize some of that more active defense that you can get out of your pets, rather than almost reactive defense where you're trying to like pull your pet out of things or swap between them. And so we always like to really promote active defense. It's why dodge is such an important part to the combat in the game. And so I think that's something that we'll continue to work on, and getting that, how much you get that interaction with your pet. I mean, I think pet interaction, it becomes really important if the main thing that I think the Ranger is about is being the primary pet class. And so we're always looking at ways we can improve that interaction and usability for you to kind of control your pet a little bit better in game. And so those are always kind of the directions that we're going for. I think this is the wrap up for the Ranger class, and just this is kind of a series of professions, and we'll continue to go down the line of all the others. Thank you everyone for watching, and make sure to subscribe and link our posts around. Thank you very much.